Welcome back to the Future of Work virtual conference. I'm Chris Bishop. Let's get straight on to our next topic of discussion, cybersecurity for the distributed, hyper-connected workplace. Now, in this day and age of continuously expanding connectivity, where we've all been working from home, it's critical for business to ensure up-to-date cybersecurity measures. This will require robust systems and policies that not only prevent threats, but also proactively seek and counter them. Just let's have a look at my panel that's coming up. Patrick Grillo is the Senior Director, Solutions Marketing at Fortinet. Through his in-depth understanding of the complexities of network security, Patrick is able to cut through the half-truths and myths surrounding the subject to provide clear and concise information to Fortinet's customers and partners. He is based in Sophia Antipolis in the south of France. Algirde Pipikaiti is the project lead for industry solutions at the Center for Cybersecurity at the World Economic Forum. She is a lawyer and a cybersecurity and digital transformation policy expert with a focus on public and private sector engagement. Eric McGee is an Associate Director in the Cyber Risk Services team at Deloitte. He is specialized in assisting customers with innovative and targeted threat hunting to ensure timeliest detection and prevention of cyber attacks. Now, if you've been working from home during this lockdown, cybercrime may have been in the back of your mind on the evidence that certainly should have been. In this COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a spike in cyber attacks around the world. According to research by the World Economic Forum, the number of attacks went up 200,000 a day as the lockdown began. Cybercrime is a murky and fast-changing world that threatens to destroy many businesses with ransom demands backed up by encryption. There are signs that many hackers are working together now in like a company setup and even taking holidays, which we'll talk about in this discussion, and getting harder and harder to catch. As one of our panelists told me the other day, hackers don't hack these days, they just sign in. So let's go to our panel now, and starting in the south of France with you, Patrick. Breaking news here in South Africa this morning, a credit bureau has been hacked. Just have a look, let's have a quick look at some of the background.
Chris, good morning, and thank you very much for that introduction. I'm very pleased to be here and be able to talk about such an interesting topic. Hopefully, the audience is already aware of it or has at least seen some headlines and hopefully has some questions that I'll be able to answer for them. My name is Patrick Grillo. I'm part of the Fortinet European marketing team, and as I said, it is a pleasure to be here today. So let's get started and talk about this thing. And this thing called SASE, and I'm going to begin, since it is an acronym, with all these other acronyms and put it into this bowl of soup that if you're familiar with networking and security terms, most of these, if not all of them, should be familiar to you. So I want SASE to take its place amongst all of its cousins, but now what is SASE? Let's try to understand a little bit more than that. It is, first of all, in its purest state, it's not a product. It's a vision or a concept that was identified by Gartner about a year ago, but with a 5 to 10 year time horizon. It's not something that when they made the announcement that they would say, and this company and this company and this company have this service or have this capability today. They do not see any vendor in the marketplace having a fully viable service today, which is why they put this out on a 5 to 10 year time horizon. Now, the objective of SASE, it's a framework to bring together what are normally two distinct environments, networking and security. And they want to bring them together quite simply so that regardless of how a user is connected to the network, either at a branch office, working from home, working remotely, whatever the case may be, that their connectivity options and their security capabilities can be delivered as a service. And this is a little bit of the contentious issue for us, that these services are delivered primarily, if not exclusively, from a cloud. And that's where we start to have a little bit of divergence with Gartner in how they see SASE versus the way that we see it. But I'll come to that in a moment. and fitting its importance for Gartner as being a convergence of networking and security. The Gartner has chosen to put SASE on both of its hype curves, or on both of the hype cycles for these two disciplines. Now, hopefully you're familiar with this figure. It's been used and misused for a number of years, but essentially it's describing visually the life cycle of a technology, starting from an inception of a very early idea to where it builds up, it captures the imagination of the industry. More and more attributes and more advantages are allocated to it, and it reaches where SASE is today at what we call the peak of inflated expectations. From there, it's only down for a while, because after months or years of organizations trying to outdo themselves, trying to get the upper hand on their competition about, oh, we've got this and look how great it is, no technology can live up to those false expectations. So it tends to disappoint. And again, we're talking about early implementations of the technology, never going to have the full functionality in the beginning. So as we go through these different life cycles or different stages of the life cycle, more and more functionality will be added to it. But from that trough of disillusionment, some technologies never make it out of there. So it's only a question of time to see what's going to happen to SASE in both of these hype cycles. There's also a color coding associated with the circle. In this case, with SASE, it's dark blue. And according to the legend at the bottom, that's where Gartner is saying we see this in the 5 to 10 year time frame from getting from where it is today to where we see into mainstream adoption. Now, SASE is not monolithic. It's not by itself. It is broken into layers, and you will, if you're looking at different offerings, eventually understand what services are being offered. Now, the principal connectivity option here, or the principal networking feature, is SD-WAN. And I'm sure you know that SD-WAN, software-defined wide area networking, has been disrupting the industry for really seriously for about the last 2 or 3 years, really impacting the way that networks are being constructed nowadays. Well, Gartner saw that as the catalyst for SASE, and that's where they came up that, yes, this is the core functionality that we want for connectivity. But then they started seeing how different security services could be added on top of it. In their opinion, in the marketplace, in the cloud as a service is the best way to do it. We don't necessarily agree with that, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Now, what prompted this? It wasn't just to say, oh, we need something new, but there have been changes going on in the industry, going on in how networks are being constructed and with different technology impacting them differently. We know that data centers are changing, have changed. Now, I can't say I don't believe that data centers as we know them today are going away. We will see more and more cloud influence, but I think what we will generally see for the vast majority of organizations is a hybrid environment. Some applications in the traditional on-premises data center, now I say traditional, that could be converted to a private cloud environment. It could be a co-located, it could be hosted by somebody, but it's that corporate data center. And then other applications are moving into a cloud environment. But remember, the dynamic nature of this is wherever an application is at any given point in time, it can move back and forth quite easily. So it's not a question of where it is, it's how do we protect it. Now, the use of cloud is also from a service, a consumption perspective. So applications like Salesforce and Microsoft 365 are now called Microsoft Office. These are SaaS, not SASE, but SaaS clouds, where rather than buying software on a licensing basis and installing it on an individual's desktop, you're buying it as a service. Now, with these changes, what we're seeing is that, or what the objective is that regardless of where you are and regardless of how you're connected into the network, we want to make sure there's a certain degree of consistency. You're connecting into the network, you're getting the security services that you need, regardless of where they may be hosted. And this is particularly important because more and more workers, more and more people are working remotely. It's a change of culture, certainly brought upon by the global pandemic, and we don't see that changing anytime soon, which kind of raises the profile these last several months of SASE to really maybe driving it a little bit further. So if we look at it on a very simple scheme, I have my user and their devices. They're out in the network somewhere. That network can consist of any number of branch locations, depending upon the organization. It certainly includes factories and other OT-oriented environments, but it can certainly include working from home or working remotely while traveling in a hotel or on holiday, as I'm doing right now, not on holiday, but working from home, recording this from home and being part of the event. Now, those users and devices want to connect up or need to connect to the network by any number of different means, and regardless of where they are, or regardless whether they're inside an office or they're working from home, we want to make sure we have the right level of connectivity for those users. And they're connecting to the network quite simply to get to the application. Now, some of those applications are in the traditional on-premises data center, some are in the public cloud, some of them it's a hybrid environment that I was talking about. So if I look at my users and how they're connected to the network, I can consider them on network and off network. It's an easy way of thinking about it. And how they're categorized generally dictates how they get access to those applications. Now, the traditional corporate network has a wide area network, gives me access to the data center, and through it, normally access to the public cloud, whether they be my hybrid applications or my SaaS applications that I'm using. My off-network environment was typically, well, particularly in hotels and working from home, you're using a local internet connection. You're connecting into the corporate network, getting access to those applications, and again, through that, whatever SaaS applications that the organization may be using. But we also know, particularly because of SD-WAN, there's been a disruption to this environment in that now with SD-WAN, leveraging the internet, having its own internet connection, a user can connect directly to the public cloud without having to pass through the data center. And the same thing with a remote user. Yes, you're using a VPN client for the most part, but most VPN clients allow something called split tunneling. So I don't have to go to the data center if I'm going to a SaaS application or I just want to go on the internet and do general surfing. So this is the environment that SASE was brought up in or was looking to address to try to bring some consistency so it could help in reducing risk and help to automate operations. Because what we want to do is minimize the complexity here. So if I take that same sort of a scenario and put my SASE environment in the middle of it, this is where you make a connection from whether, in theory, whether from your on-network or your off-network environments into the SASE cloud. That will terminate your connection, provide you with whatever security services that have been subscribed to or that are needed for that connection, and then give you access to your different environments. Now, this is where, again, we get into a point of contention or a difference of opinion in that, yes, SASE very definitely has a role to play. We're not saying that it doesn't. However, we believe more of a hybrid approach is correct in that looking at the needs of individual locations, looking at it rather than a one-size-fits-all, tailoring the type of connectivity and maintaining the same level of protection regardless of how you're connected in, regardless of which services you want. Can those services be applied locally at the site, or is it more appropriate for those services to be deployed in the cloud and let the user take advantage of it there? That's where we believe, or that's how we believe that this evolution has to take place. It's not one or the other, it's two of them working in concert with each other and complementing each other if done correctly. Now, SASE certainly has some clear advantages in certain environments, remote users, very small locations. I'm thinking kiosk in shopping centers and malls, so that something can be set up very quickly, just a quick internet connection, and then all of the security services you need are then supplied by the SASE cloud. So there's very much a role for both environments in here, and that's why with our philosophy on this, or our perspective on this, and again, using Gartner's language about a thick edge where you put devices at the location versus a thin edge where it's just connectivity and services are being applied from the cloud, we believe that both should and can coexist. The consolidating element, of course, is SD-WAN, whether it's a full function, what we call secure SD-WAN, or is it just the networking component of SD-WAN, and then all of the security services being supplied from the cloud. And it's this concept that we're talking about in the market, supporting SASE, but supporting SASE in perspective of the other options that are available, rather than saying everything has to be done in one particular way. But access to a network is only part of the problem. That data center, it has to be secure. Those applications, regardless of where they reside, have to be secure as well. And what needs to be done is, when you're looking at how your network is constructed and how the network is changing to support corporate requirements, whether you call it digital innovation or digital transformation, is that you need to step back and look at it holistically. If I do something in my access network, what's going to be the impact of how I'm securing my data center or how I'm securing my cloud environment? Can I apply a consistent security posture across these different elements so that I have no breakdowns in visibility and control, and maintain a level of protection across the network, regardless of what I'm talking about, regardless how the user is connected, regardless of what application that they're going to. So to wrap this up, we believe 100% Gartner is correct. We support it, and in fact, it's one of the founding tenets of when the company was founded 20 years ago. Excuse me. We also believe that today you can get started with what we call secure SD-WAN. That's locally supplied SD-WAN with all of the security services running at the location. And then as the network grows, as SASE as a technology matures a little bit, then a decision can be made as to how and when to continue. So Chris, thank you again for having me here. I very much appreciate it, and I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for those insights. Now he joins on the line now from the south of France, along with Algirde Pipikaite from Geneva and Eric McGee here in Johannesburg to unpack this whole issue of cybersecurity. Now start with you, Eric, here in Johannesburg, making news this morning, and it's a sign of the times, and you tell me how much of a sign of the times it is. 24 million customers, that's almost half the nation, as you know, and 800,000 businesses were exposed and their personal information exposed by an online fraudster. How much of this is a sign of the times? You've got to unmute there, I think, Eric. Sorry. Okay. I think we're still struggling there. Perhaps we can come back to you. But if I can go to you, Algirde Pipikaite. I mean, we were talking the other day about how this whole cybersecurity business has developed. And you were telling me now that there's signs that hackers are now working in company setups. They work 8 to 5 now and take time off at Christmas and New Year. So how is this threat growing? Okay, we're having a bit of a problem with our communication there. I'm afraid we're going to throw it a break. We'll come back with the discussion. Oh, thank you very much. Algirde, did you hear that last question?
Yes, I did.
Indeed. Well, as I say, there are signs that hackers are now working in organized and taking holidays. How is this threat increasing?
So the cyber criminal activity are definitely increasing, and it's one of the most rising criminal activities globally, not excluding any continent, because the opportunity or the possibility of being caught is very low, and the rewards are pretty high. You don't need to go anywhere. You can do it from your home environment or to whatever organizational environment that your hacking community organization has established. Another sign that hackers are actually becoming much more organized is the tendency that we have seen right now in the last 6-7 months of 2020 is how they used and abused the coronavirus pandemic, the first months of the pandemic, and actually focused all of their majority of their hacking activities online on coronavirus. And that tendency, as the countries and organizations are coming back to what's so normal, that tendency is actually falling off. So you mentioned 200,000 attacks on a weekly basis that Check Point has reported related on coronavirus. That tendency is decreasing right now. Good news is right now we have on a weekly basis around 61,000 of attacks focused on COVID-19. But on the other hand, since hackers are coming back to normality, normal hacking attacks are increasing. So attacks overall are increasing, except from literally the most hot topic of the day. That's what hackers are focusing.
If I could come back to you now, Eric, here in Johannesburg. What's the picture in Africa? Because even here, companies reporting that there was a huge spike during the coronavirus lockdown, as I said in the intro. What's the scene here on the continent?
Exactly the same. I agree with Oblige. I think we've seen the same increase, a large increase in attacks, just focusing on the pandemic and tricking people into, disclosing information just by using the pandemic as a way to entice them to do so. We've seen many attacks, but I agree. In the end, I think the hackers are using the right topic to entice people, and the pandemic, I think, is now wavering off. But we haven't seen a decrease in attacks. As you rightly said, we've seen 2 major incidents this week alone in South Africa and Africa. And I think that will just continue. I think also with the economic pressure that comes with the pandemic, there's a larger motivation from a criminal element to also drive this. So we certainly will see an increase. And the topic of the day will obviously be the means in which they attack individuals.
If I could just come back to you now, Patrick Grillo, in the south of France. If you give your perspective, and I'll just add the caveat here. I mean, a few years ago here at CNBC Africa, we interviewed Frank Abagnale, who was the real-life character in Catch Me If You Can, the film by Leonardo DiCaprio. And he said to us, well, listen, if you've got a Facebook account, I can get your date of birth, I can get your signature from somewhere, and I can empty your bank account within half an hour. I mean, and that's quite some time ago. How much more sophisticated do you think the cybercrime is likely to get?
Oh, well, first of all, I mean, a key word of all of this is opportunistic, to go back to the comments of the other panelists. I mean, a few years ago, the big piece was ransomware, and then it was cryptojacking, using other people's computer to mine for Bitcoins. Now it's the COVID-19 pandemic. Another aspect of it is the hacker. Yes, there are true hackers out there, and by that what I mean the people that find the unknowns and take advantage of them. But hacking or launching cyber attacks is a service now. You don't have to really be a hacker to do it. All you need is money, because going on the dark web, you can find whatever you need. And you take a look at it, some of they're priced by day of week, time of day. There are service level agreements that go with them. There's beta testing, alpha testing. It is a business, going back to the earlier point. And that's only going to continue in this cat and mouse game that we play. Now, Fortinet being on the other side of the equation, trying to keep up or possibly get ahead of the hackers. the hackers working collaboratively are constantly pushing the envelope, looking for new ways of breaking in, looking for new ways to find the gullibility in people getting the emails, because the primary attack vector, the primary way they get into your account is by email, and somehow enticing you to give up some piece of personal information. And as you said, once you have one piece of it, for the experienced hacker, it's very easy to collect other pieces of information, quite often from other data breaches that have happened.
Algid, if I can come back to you as well. I mean, I borrowed a couple of your words there for the intro. I mean, there was a time when people would be trying to catch people out, but you say these days the hackers are so sophisticated, they can get so many passwords, so much that they just sign in and take what they want.
You're totally right, and that's on points of Eric and Patrick's. As Patrick mentioned, email is one of the main points of entry. Actually, around 80% of attacks go via emails, let it be phishing, malware, data theft, or account takeover attacks. On top of that, more than 95% of attacks are actually focused and based on social engineering. So to get that extra piece of information on you, they will study your account, understand what your potential vulnerabilities are, or the points of interest that will make you click on certain link, and boom, you're inside the network. You don't need very hardcore technical skills and focus on technical vulnerabilities, because that's quite challenging, as Patrick said. It's much easier always to find a human vulnerability, and especially in times of stress, in times of everyone shifting to remote working environment. You know, what we've seen is, in speaking with the CISO community, is that the main challenge is how to ensure protection for their employees and third parties of the same security that they can provide in a physical office outside when everyone is connecting and working remotely. And that's a challenge that's not going anywhere. Actually, what we've seen right now is more than 40% of employees are actually more productive working remotely. So organizations are taking notice of that, and around 75% of them have said, we will stay in whatever form or matter permanently working remotely. I'm pretty sure hackers are taking that note of that. And they're automating, they are getting much more advanced in their technologies. And more than that, hackers do not have any legal requirements to fulfill to actually communicate cross-border. So if you're on a dark net, on deep net, if you are in the circles of black hats, people that hack to actually exploit vulnerabilities and gain money or any other materials, they don't have the burden that the public and private sector, law enforcement agencies and private sector has when they want to exchange information. So we are actually on the good side, we are in a disadvantage. And make no mistake, hackers know that.
And if I could go back to you, Eric, especially here in Africa, could you give us an idea of some of the havoc that can be caused by these cyber attacks? I mean, the other day we were talking about a shipping company that didn't know where its ships were anymore because they'd been hacked. Just give us a quick sketch of a case study, if you could.
Yeah, so I was involved a couple of years back in an incident which I think can resonate with everybody, where a school was attacked and they had a ransomware attack. So we got involved 3 days in, and the poor situation, or the poor IT department, recovered all their systems. But their challenge was that they made online backups, and the backups were also encrypted. So all their data was gone. So even though they had their systems back on, all their data, their academic records, their financial records, everything was gone. So they literally had nowhere to go. They were on their knees. They couldn't operate. And that just gives you an idea of the impact it has. In this case, the hacker did have a heart, and they pleaded with him because they were a school. And by some miracle, he did release the encryption keys, and the systems could be, or the data could be recovered. but it just goes to show the impact it can have in an organization. And especially smaller, medium to small organizations are at so much more risk, because for them the resilience is much less, and they could really just be brought to their knees. You talk about the shipping company that happened through an attack in Ukraine. And again, there it was a different motivation initially, probably a nation-state type of attack against the country. But there's also collateral damage, and in this case, the collateral damage spread across the world, and many organizations were impacted by it, not the intended target only. And again, these attacks literally disable all your systems. So you're not able to operate, you're not able to understand what goes on. You have no financial records, nothing. And so the impact can be extremely severe in those cases.
I go back to you now, Patrick. You heard the story there, straight out of Africa. The hackers had a heart. They gave a school back its encryption key. One, how rare is that in the world picture now? And secondly, who are these people out there who are doing this? Can you give us paint some sort of picture of that?
They're people you meet on the street every day. I'm assuming with what Eric was mentioning, it was a ransomware attack. We're seeing these happening more and more. Particularly, we're in our second or third wave of these ransomware attacks, and they've seemed to have focused on municipalities or townships, getting into the systems, and these systems are generally, unfortunately, quite basic that they're able to hack into. And what we're seeing, that the resulting trend is they are paying the ransoms, and we're talking several hundreds of thousands of dollars in a lot of cases. Who is a hacker? I mean, the classic of a socially rejected, hood-wearing person locked in a dark space. Yes, it's a stereotype. There's a grain of truth to it, but any one of us could be hackers. Nobody wears a badge at a conference says, "Hi, my name is such and such, and I'm a hacker." It's why they do it. The motivations. In some cases, it is being malcontent. In other cases, it's a business. It's a big business. If you remember a few years ago, there's a home improvement chain in the United States called Home Depot. They were hacked. Several months before the hack became public, I happened to be in the US doing some work at my sister's house using my American Express card. 3 or 4 months later, from Friday night to Saturday morning, I get panic emails and texts from American Express. Somebody had tried to purchase $8,000 worth of goods on Apple by the internet. My credit card number had been sold and resold some number of times. Fortunately for me, my first line of defense, American Express's fraud prevention software, caught it. But that's when it really touched home to me, working in the industry, and yet I was an innocent victim caught up in this hundreds of thousands, I think it was actually millions of credit card numbers that were scooped up. The motivations vary as broadly as any motivation does. Why people do it, for personal recognition to being malcontent. There's a lot of cases there's no rhyme or reason, but they are organized gangs, and we're seeing more and more of it. Yes, there is still the lone wolf, but more often than not, it is either a formal or a loosely knit organizations of multiple personalities.
If I could go back to Algid in Geneva again, I mean, you've got the global perspective as well. You've studied this intensively. I mean, one of the things that's causing a big lot of hurt and issue here in Africa is with this COVID-19, funds coming in, trying to help people, save them literally from starvation, and there's been fraud. People have tried to hack, people have tried to steal this money. And this, how much of a worldwide trend is this?
So globally, as everything is shifting to digital, and especially in the last 6 months, it drastically shifted to digital. So is crime shifting. Fraud has been there on the phone lines when we all used phone lines. It's been in the first emails, trying to get your bank information and your bank details from the get-go of email establishment. Now it's getting much more sophisticated. It's getting much more widely used, and different regions globally are differently impacted. Considering Africa has around 25% of internet penetration. So it's still comparatively low to either North America or European region, but it's growing, and it's growing very quickly, also because the population of Africa is extremely young. So the application of digitalization is happening very quickly. And at least I see, when I look into Africa, an enormous opportunity for leaders of this continent to actually turn cybersecurity into a massive opportunity. Considering the future of work and future of jobs, actually providing digital skill set education, focused also on cybersecurity awareness and the importance of it, Africa could ensure that their future economy will be secure, and majority of future economy will be digitally based, and provide opportunity to, you know, the upcoming generation of young Africans. So if you look into cybercrime and where it is rising in the regions and countries where there are no other or very limited economical opportunities. And considering that in developing countries, around 40% of unemployment is among youth, taking digital skill set and providing that education actually provides a great opportunity to take young population on the good side and use their digital skill sets, innovative thinking, problem solving, and analytical abilities for the good.
If I can come back to you, Eric, here, I mean, that begs the question about how vulnerable are we in Africa? I mean, in a moment, we're going to get on to solutions. I have a question from the audience about how we can protect ourselves. But you've got 20 years of experience in this continent. Just give us an idea of where things were in your perspective 20 years ago, and also perhaps how vulnerable we are here in 2020.
Thank you very much. You're giving away my age there. So very much vulnerable. I think Aldrich put it well earlier that, you know, we're in Africa, but this is a global problem. So we're just as vulnerable as anybody else. The attackers do not care about borders. They do not care about where they come from or where they go. They have the motivation of tricking you into, you know, for financial reasons or whatever their motivation might be. So I think we're very, very similarly vulnerable, and you know, we may have specific problems and specific issues in the continent, and that's the way that they will try to exploit us. So that might be different, but you know, from a vulnerability point of view, we're the same. If you look at how it's evolved over the years, I think I've certainly seen the same tactics just being sharpened and being applied in a much more focused way and much more sophisticated. So if we look at, you know, in the old days, we used to have viruses that would do the same as a ransomware attack, would disable your computer. But today, the ability of the code to replicate itself, to find ways in, to exploit, and to be very modular in its application, so that it can, you know, exploit different attack techniques and so forth, are just so much more sophisticated. So over the years, I think it's just evolved, and I think the availability, as Patrick mentioned and Aldrich mentioned, in terms of the dark web, and the fact that a lot of these things are offered as services. So your skills, your actual technical skills do not need to be that high. You can literally buy services and actually get somebody to do it for you. So I think that's the major change that has happened over the years. But you know, the techniques are just sharpened and improved. And I think what I also have noticed, and I think, you know, in the earlier days, cybercrime was very a technical approach and very technical in its nature. Today, it's the criminal world has definitely caught on. So a lot of the attacks are, you know, technical by nature, but also target the humans. Many of the major breaches I've seen over the last, let's say, 5 years, are actually much more focused on the human element and targeting the privileged user or the person that has the keys to the crown jewels, and understands the processes internally. And often techniques are not very technical. They just threaten that person, personally, either themselves or their families. And again, social media helps them to find who their social links are, and through there actually get to them and then actually attack them that way. And so once you have that person's under your control, you sit behind all these technical controls, and a strong password doesn't help. A firewall or whatever you have in place doesn't help. So I think that I've seen in the last 5 years, really focused on getting to the person that can get them to actually inflict real damage into an organization.
Okay, well, now we go to the million-dollar question, which I direct to you, Patrick, from the audience listening in. How can organizations protect themselves and counter cyber security threats?
It's a good question, and it's a two-part answer. It has to start internally with the people, because as Eric just mentioned, they are quite often the weakest link in the chain. That if you think of any organization and you look at the size of that company, the number of people that are in it, and the percentage of those people who have access to technology, either supplied through the company or allowed to use their own, that's probably an overwhelming majority of the company's population. However, the people you look at with that, then the number of people who are aware of the consequences of that technology is normally quite small. So an ongoing education process is absolutely essential to take what is normally the weakest link in the chain and make it your first line of defense. Make them aware of the consequences, not punitively in case they're caught out, but through education. And even to the point, what most companies should do is to run their own campaigns to try to trick people into giving up information. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is technology. There is no one technology that will keep an organization safe. And quite honestly, no technology, it's impossible to say to take this or to follow this approach will block all attacks, because of the creativity and the point that was brought out before, that the hackers are not confined by the same constraints we have in private industry. Understand that there are multiple layers to security. You want to prevent or block as much of these attacks coming in, because regardless of the headlines, the vast majority of malware that's used in these attacks is something we already know about. So systems should be well aware of what's happened in the past, or you'll be doomed to repeat it. That first line of defense has to be reinforced with other technologies, detection technologies, that will look for any malware that does happen to get in, because that's always the case. We're always looking at the creativity of how a slight change can make it bypass that first line of defense. And then finally, the third line is response and automation. Something has happened, there's a detection, the network as well as the people running the network need the tools, need the capabilities to respond to it as quickly as possible to minimize the amount of damage. But don't listen to any silver bullets that if you do this or if you buy this, you will be protected. That's a fallacy these days.
And just hold that thought there, Patrick. Got another question for you to follow up to that from the floor. Someone's asking, how important is ethical leadership? How do you get the right people into your system to defend yourself against these attacks?
I think that's an eternal question, whether we're talking about cybersecurity or somebody walking out of the bank with a bag full of money. That culture has to be developed within the organization. And when you're hiring people, when you're looking at people, it's not only it's their skill set, will they be able to fit in? Will they be able to work in the environment that we are trying to establish in the company? That insider threat is always an issue, and there are some technologies available to help deal with that. But again, it's developing it through education, awareness, and training about the consequences and what is expected. What I see far too often when talking to customers is they bring somebody on board, there's a minimal onboarding process, passwords are on Post-it notes stuck to their screens, and unfortunately, in that sort of environment, it kind of invites some unethical behavior.
Now, I'll come back to you, Algid, in Geneva. As I say, everyone needs to protect themselves against this, but as you know probably a lot better than I, that as we speak, people are out there. They're writing new malware that could attack systems that are just coming on stream now. How much of a battle is it going to be against these hackers?
Oh, it's going to be an uphill battle, that's for sure. And what I always like to say to my friends, colleagues, and anyone actually that I meet on the way, if you're looking for any confirmed job for the future, go to cybersecurity. It's not going anywhere. We will need to protect our networks more and more because cybercrime is increasing, as well as the protection has to increase. There are some sectors that are, of course, much more advanced than the others, considering banking, financial institutions. But at the same time, there are sectors that are just catching up, including education, healthcare, tourism. And there is a lot of work that has to be done because the bad guys and gals are catching up and are definitely becoming more and more creative. Thinking about the future and preparing every single organization, let it be public or private, to better defend themselves, I see two solutions. One is actually ensure and create ways and patterns for private and public sector collaboration. And that is what we focus a lot at the World Economic Forum and the Center for Cybersecurity, is making sure that we provide this platform for both private and public sector leaders and cyber experts to come up, talk about challenges, and find solutions. Secondly, it's a responsibility of every single organization's leadership, let it be on a board level or a C-suite, exactly as Patrick mentioned. If you do not have cybersecurity aware culture within your organization, it's going to be extremely difficult to defend because you cannot deploy technology to basically close every single endpoint entering organization's network. What you can do is to have your workforce aware and actually very critical of every single thing that reaches them through either a mobile device or their laptop or any other digitally connected device that they are using. Especially in the environment when we are using a lot of professional technology for our private usage. There is very limited workforce percentage that actually divides their personal matters and uses them on a personal network and a personal device, and then at the same time, working from home, have set up a different network and use professional device. So just presume, if you are running an organization, that your workforce is doing their personal matters where they are much more vulnerable on professional devices. And how do you defend it? It's only through awareness and education. And that's where board role, C-suite role, is very important to actually ensure that cybersecurity team is not in the back office locked up somewhere, but they are within every single employee.
So Eric McGee in Johannesburg, I'll bring it all back to Africa. I mean, we've done numerous stories on data breaches during our broadcasting at CNBC Africa. And some of the feeling I've got is that maybe sometimes firms aren't spending enough money on protecting themselves, and maybe some of them think it's not going to happen to them and not taking it seriously enough. What do you think the situation is on the ground?
I think those days are over. I think most organizations are aware. I think one of the biggest challenges I see organizations face is a very siloed approach in terms of how they deal with the cybercrime. So what I mean by that is you have typically the cyber team that's part of the IT infrastructure team, and they're the ones that are responsible to protect the organization. But the reality is, as we've discussed at length in this insert, is the fact that people, process, and the business around that is just as responsible to protect, because technology will not defend against attacks. They will defend against a technical attack. So I think one of the major changes that most organizations need to consider is how do they bring together their fraud and their risk and their business areas to accommodate a way of detecting malicious activity that is pending, that they can together see coming. Very, very complex attacks often are visible over time, but because it's the responsibility of the cyber team and the IT infrastructure team to deal with protecting the organization, nobody else takes responsibility. So I think breaking down those silos, looking at how you detect beyond just the IT infrastructure, but also within the business logic and the business applications and the processes and the fraud department. How do we detect strange activity and bring all of them together to have a much more integrated view and approach to protecting organizations? I think that for me is the most critical thing. And I think it's here in Africa. I think it's across the globe. So that's one of the areas that we really focus on, is trying to help customers to understand that this risk is broader than just an IT infrastructure play, and it has to incorporate other areas so that you're well aware. Also, very importantly, is to utilize things like threat intelligence. So what's happening out there? Where are things happening? What is the trend? What is coming? What is happening in other places in the world, in your own industry, so that you can use that intelligence to also prepare yourself. And then to deal with an incident is really, really important. So once it happens, it will happen to you. It's not a case of if, but when. And when it happens, are you prepared for it? Have you simulated this? Have you understood the impact it will have in terms of other areas, not just the IT infrastructure, but the public relations impact, the legal implication, the regulatory implication. In South Africa, we have the privacy legislation that's now enforced. And what does that require of you in terms of disclosure, in terms of reporting the incident, and potentially the regulatory implications on you to follow, when an incident happens. So it has to be a multi-dimensional, multifaceted approach, and not just an infrastructure approach. So I think that is the most critical factor that I think organizations should consider. Look at this holistically and make sure that they have a view that protects them, from all angles. The attackers will find the weakest link, and in most cases, as we've said, it's not a technology only attack.
Patrick, what about cyber insurance? Are more companies turning to that now?
Well, we're seeing companies using it. We're also seeing organizations, it being abused, thinking that cyber insurance is an effective alternative to everything that Eric just said and all the other panelists have said. It's part of a strategy, but that's all it is to help you recover from an attack, a data breach. It's not going to stop an attack in itself. So it's the right it's the right tool for the right job. It has a place, but it's not a substitute for the awareness training, the employee culture, the multiple levels of defense when you're using technology. So understand its role rather than relying on it as a placebo.
So if I go back to you, I'll get it in Geneva. I mean, one of the saddest things is that a lot of companies being attacked are small and medium enterprises. We've talked about protection, we've talked about insurance, we've talked about ways to invest but a lot of these companies, especially right now in COVID-19, simply can't afford to protect themselves.
That is a very good question. And actually, when we think that the multinationals and big organizations are better equipped and better prepared to protect themselves, that is very true. What we also think that in many occasions, small and medium enterprises do not actually need to pay a lot of attention because they're small, they're medium. Nobody will come after them. Why they should be interesting, if we have Googles and Microsofts of the world. The challenge is that on average, a cybersecurity incident, a breach, can be costing on around $3 to $4 million. That's on average. So of course it can cost less, it can cost more. The problem here is that that amount for a small and medium enterprise can actually be deadly. And that's why these enterprises need to pay more attention and have the platforms that they're using and an aware, culturally aware, cyber aware workforce that works hand in hand with them. And especially the regulators will not give you an excuse because you're a small and medium enterprise. If you are touching any private, personal identifiable information, PII, you are obliged to actually have your security in order and have proofs, in some cases audits, in other cases certifications and licenses, actually proving that the data that you are collecting is secured enough, or you have put effort to protect it. Otherwise, you're not only going to be hacked, regulators would come with actually fines, and that will be double costing for you. So the main challenges, but that everyone is facing, small and medium enterprises, big businesses, and governments, is actually the lack of workforce. And that is why cybersecurity, in many circumstances, becomes a very expensive affair, because to hire cybersecurity analyst, cybersecurity team, or a cybersecurity service company is very expensive because we are just lacking highly skilled cybersecurity experts. And that's, again, where I will keep repeating, there is a great opportunity for young countries to step in and actually fill that gap.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time now. If I could have a quick, very quick wrap up from you, starting with you, Eric, and finally with you, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think for me, cybersecurity is multidimensional, multifaceted. I think small organizations, as Aldridge has said, is not immune, and I think the cost of not doing it is potentially higher than spending money. I think what we do see is a lot of ingrained security capabilities built into many of the, for instance, cloud services. That almost comes for free or at a reasonable cost. But I think it's really important to take notice, to also understand what your real risks are, and then spend your money wisely. So not just do things because a compliance officer or compliance drive is out there. So understand your real risk and make sure that you protect targetedly those risks that you face. I think that's really important. So thank you for the opportunity.
Patrick.
I'd start with awareness and going back to the individual. I mean, with social media and everything, just think before you supply that information. From an organizational standpoint, as was mentioned, yes, there is a big shortage, so there is a real opportunity there. And for the smaller companies, look for partnerships. You're just having internet connectivity. That's your basic connectivity to the world. Work with your local suppliers who can manage that for you, leveraging their expertise. It doesn't abdicate your responsibility in case of a breach, but it does prepare you to be better armed to prevent that breach from happening. But what it really all comes down is awareness, both from an end user perspective, as well as the organization itself.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Patrick Grillo, Senior Director, Solutions Marketing at Fortinet. Coming to us in the south of France from Geneva, we had Elgide Pipikaite, the Project Lead for Industry Solutions Center for Cybersecurity at the World Economic Forum. And here in Johannesburg, we had Eric McGee, Associate Director, Cyber Risk Services Team for Deloitte. It's time for a short ad break now. When we come back, we'll have a discussion on how SaaS and cloud computing can help African enterprises future-proof their business models.